Hello and welcome back, Commanders, Cerebrits, and Executors, the StarCraft Lorecast, the podcast where we dive into the lore, stories, and the interesting and fun facts about the StarCraft universe. I am your host, Jeremy, otherwise known as General Fire, and I hope you're ready to dive back into this universe we love. So, quick side note, I know I said I was going to try to do a faction look at the Zerg Swarm. Unfortunately, research is still taking a little bit longer, but I do have another faction I was going to be talking about pretty quickly. But so today we'll still be going over the major factions that have had an impact on the StarCraft universe as a whole. And let's move on. Liberty, freedom, the fight against corrupt rulers or overseers. Most rebellions are built on these foundations. Their goal is to free themselves and others from an oppressive regime that is taking too much from the people. Examples of this are the Rebel Alliance from Star Wars, the Red Faction from the Red Faction series, and the Resistance from Half-Life 2. But those foundations are not all a rebellion is formed on, because sometimes rebellions are formed off of anger, vengeance, or the desire for power. Examples that come to mind: Saw Gerrera's rebel forces from Star Wars, and Horus's rebellion from Warhammer. But today we're going to be talking about a resistance movement slash rebel faction in the series. And yeah, today's, it's not Raiders Raiders like some might be taking. Today's is the Sons of Korhal, a resistance movement founded and dedicated to fighting against and toppling the Terran Confederacy, led by Arcturus Minx. So, the faction that we all technically play as in the Terran campaign of the original StarCraft game. But as with every rebellion, we have to go into the origins or how it was founded. In the Sons of Korhal, weren't just created overnight. It is technically a continuation of another rebel group, one which was led by Arcturus Minx's father, Senator Angus Minx. And he was the leader for the rebellion on Korhal, which would end in disaster. So, the roots of the rebellion were envisaged by Angus Minx, scion of the old families. He attacked the Terran Confederacy and old families politically, denouncing them for the corrupt rule and seeking to free the planet from the Confederacy's grip. Manx would seek assistance from Umaja, I'm always going to mess that up, in the form of Ambassador Eileen Pasteur to little avail. However, when Pasteur came to visit, a corporate death squad tried to murder them. The team was defeated by the Manx family and their security team, led by Acton Fell. The killers would turn out to be Confederate neurally resocialized Marines. Umoja would then support the rebellion with arms technology, enabling the rebels to kill hundreds of Confederate troops in bombing attacks and ambushes. The Manx dynasty ensured its corporations were self-sufficient to avoid Confederate pressure and imported these spare parts daily. Manx's son Arcturus came to know of this but disagreed with his father and generally remained uninterested in politics. As the secret rebellion continued, hundreds of Confederate Marines were killed through ambushes and bombs, and the unit continued to send military technology to Corps, including tanks. The media would downplay these incidents and attributed them to lone madmen, but with deployments of the planet's militia, events on the ground told a different story. But then we go into open rebellion. By the end of the Guild Wars in 2489, the rebellion had millions of troops, and Angus Manx declared Korhal independent from the Confederacy. Martial law was declared by the Confederacy, who would send in additional troops to reinforce their garrisons on the planet and restore order. This, though, only seemed to agitate the populace even more and would escalate the already rampant civil chaos. Manx whipped the Korhalians into a volatile, patriotic frenzy and captured all the Confederate outposts on Korhal. The Confederates would eventually withdraw their forces from Korhal and would instead send three assassins to kill Angus Manx in the capital, Stirling, along with his wife and daughter. The head of his decapitated body was never found. So these three assassins were ghosts, and one of them was actually Sarah Kerrigan. So if you all haven't read the short story StarCraft Uprising, this kind of goes over some of the events of his assassination, and they would end up taking his head to, I believe, it's been a minute since I read that story. I believe the old families or whatnot, but they took his head to kind of be both kind of a humiliating and demoralizing act. But that didn't happen because Arcturus Minx in the past never agreed with his father's fiery anti-Confederate rhetoric, became filled with an unwavering desire for vengeance. With the assistance of Eileen Pasteur, and Arcturus Manx would be put in charge of the rebellion. Manx rallied the various militant groups that had followed his father against the Confederacy. They struck at various Confederate bases and installations, costing the old families billions of credits in men, machines, and equipment. Manx would then form an alliance with the Umajan Protectorate and would go to Umaja to make plans with the separatist factions he had been able to contact. When a Confederate battlecruiser crashed near Umajan territory, well out of range of the Confederate hailing frequencies, Manx pressed it into service of his rebellion. Its captain, Pollock Grimes, and crew would also join the rebellion. But this, so, and so Arcturus Manx was also part of the Confederate military for a time as an officer. And so he would take these militant groups that his father would had followed his father and would utilize those tactics to include destroying old family owned factories in order to create maximum economic damage, destroying supply route bridges on key planets, hacking into Confederate mainframes, and staging mine worker revolts. Even the rebellion's underground network became increasingly vocal in the protests, rendering such a term something of a misnomer. But all would not turn out well for this rebellion on Korhal because while Arcturus Minx was at Iomija, the Confederate would fire 1,000 Apocalypse-class nuclear missiles at Korhal, killing millions of people and obliterating most of the planet's infrastructure, crushing the mass rebellion once and for all. Following this event, the movement was reduced to only 30 soldiers. Minx would quickly recruit more from Umaja and would rename themselves the Sons of Korhal. Public outrage brought an endless stream of support and volunteers. This attack would harden the remaining men and women of Korhal into some of the fiercest warriors in the Caputo sector. And due to the nuclear devastation of their homeland, they have demonstrated complete willingness to use their own nuclear arsenal against any potential enemy. So, during this, Minx would rename the captured battlecruiser that he had taken as the Hyperion. This, so, this is how the Sons of Korhal formed after this rebellion. It was a pretty devastating blow onto, technically, the Confederacy after they launched all those missiles and would end up destroying most of Korhal. It was the wrong, in my opinion, it was the wrong choice because instead of demoralizing and making it so nobody else would want to rebel, they kind of pushed people to rebel at that point. Because if the Confederacy is willing to destroy an entire planet to kill one rebellion movement, what would they do to everyone else? So But the Sons of Korhal would quickly become the most wanted fugitives in the sector, as they would win countless victories over the Confederacy with methods and tactics that ranged from harsh to nefarious. Although most colonies refused to house or provide services to anyone affiliated with the Sons of Korhal, they continued to confound Confederate enforcement agencies. Within a few months, of course, Warfield was quietly directing Meigs' attacks. His intimate knowledge of the Confederacy's military strength, position, and movements were invaluable to the success of the rebellion. Sorry. Graven Hill and Remy Harris would provide mercenaries to Sons of Korhal until the Confederate forces captured a group of mercenary-backed rebels and discovered their source. One of the Sons of Korhal members would visit Terrador 9 and recruit Matt Horner. S- They would accept him as a member and would encourage him to go through military training with the Confederate fleet. Horner would become first officer of the Cormorant, which enjoyed a lot of success, dodging Confederate patrols as it transported supplies and troops between star systems for the Sons of Korhal. One of the rebellion's first missions was to infiltrate a facility on Victor 5 called the Fujita Facility. It was hidden in a stable and violent weather formation called the Fujita Pinnacle. The planet's security was formidable, but nonetheless, Meng's daring tactics enabled the rebels to destroy the facility's defenses and raid it. Within, they discovered a young psychic named Sarah Kerrigan, a scientist, Dr. Flanks, and xenomorphs, which, as we know, are what the Zerg were originally called by the Terrans. The later, slain by Pollock Rhymes. Kerrigan's memory had been wiped and her psychic abilities restrained like those of most other ghosts, but she quickly became a valuable member of Manx teams to the irritation of Rhymes. Manx, though, was annoyed at the Confederate cover-up of his attacks, however. The media would report that the terrorists had attacked an environmental facility and did not name the attackers. Manx's hidden information sources led him to openly appear in the space of the Terran Confederacy and the Hyperion. As he did so, he told Kerrigan that he hadn't retrieved her because of the secrets of Victor 5, but because she knew the layout of the Ghost Academy on Tarsonis. Kerrigan's memory was returning, and soon she would remember how to get through it and perform a special mission for Manx. A mole within the Sons of Korhal drew the attention of Edmund Duke, a high-ranking Terran Confederacy military officer commanding his battlecruiser, the NORAD II. Duke expertly blocked the Hyperion from exiting into warp space and would send a detachment of Marines onto the Hyperion. The Hyperion attempted to escape, and inside, Mengsk laid plans for an ambush of both the Marines and the NORAD II. In the end, the Marines were slain. Dr. Flanks was dead, the NORAD II was heavily damaged, and the Hyperion had escaped. Though, throughout all this, Duke had sent a ghost secretly onto the Hyperion, however, which started to kill rebels. Sarah Kerrigan took Minx's sidearm and fought the ghost. She would eventually kill them with a large knife, and when informing Minx of this development, she was able to read some of his thoughts. He believed it was one of the three, but carefully blanked his mind, preventing Kerrigan from reading anything else. So, as you see, Sons of Korhal are having quite a few good victories under their belts, but you know how it is. Propaganda machine and the government controlling the news outlets could cause it where nobody actually notices what you're doing. You see that a lot. Moving on to the mission of the Ghost Academy. So, with the assistance of a mining guild, Arcturus Mengsk planned an attack on the Ghost Academy on Tarsonis. He told his rebels the primary purpose of the attack was to draw media attention, hopefully creating support for his group. While many people were opposed to Terran Confederacy policies, they didn't know of any outlets for their frustrations. Mengsk privately informed Kerrigan that he wanted her to retrieve a specific ghost. Doing so would require her to attack Major Rum, a figure from her past whom she bore great hatred for. The attack, though, was something of a disaster. The group did not have enough force to destroy the academy and fight their way out, and were hindered by Mole. Their most capable soldier was also on a separate mission. Only Kerrigan, unfortunately, would make it out alive. after the Academy's fusion reactor had been destroyed with the captive Ghost. She was safely retrieved by Manx, who quickly escaped the Confederates. Manx would reveal his private motivations to Kerrigan, who reaffirmed her loyalty to him. The actions resulted in media coverage of the Sons of Korhal, which were identified as a dangerous terrorist group. So, finally, this is finally when the Sons of Korhal would get noticed by the media itself. And as you know, a group like that, if they're fighting against something people hate and media coverage of any kind happens, people will take notice and people will probably join up. You never know. So, well, moving on to their continued crusade, the Sons of Korhal resorted to increasingly ruthless tactics as they continued their insurgency. By the year 2497, Manx believed the Sons of Korhal could field an army which could match any fielded by the Confederacy. Late in 2499, Alpha Squadron would return to Chowsara in order to put down a local uprising by the Sons of Korhal. Its first foes, however, were Xenomorphs, which were quickly defeated. Shortly thereafter, Alpha Squadron would make contact with the secretive Cerberus Recon Squad, whose leader claimed knowledge of these Xenomorphs. The squad assisted Alpha Squadron in destroying the Sons of Korhal base. The Sons of Korhal would then flee from Chowsara. Meanwhile, Manx would continue his crusade against the old families who led the Confederacy, targeting the Terra family by destroying their hoverbike factory in Palombo Valley and organizing pirate transmissions condemning them. And then moving on, we finally get into the events of the first StarCraft game because we get to Mar Sara. So, in December of 2499, the Sons of Korhal intervened on Mar Sara, evacuating thousands of colonists which the Confederacy had abandoned to desert. They liberated Marshal Jim Raynor and the former militia forces from the Confederate prison ship. Ironically, the aliens were called to this world, or at least the part of it they were on, by a Sons of Korhal agent, Meredith Jernick, using a top secret psi emitter. She was captured by a band of Confederate Marines who activated the psi emitter, luring many Zerg to their position long enough to give the defenders of Mar Sara City a fighting chance. Warfield would give Manx intel about the Jacobs installation. Raynor would raid the facility and discover that the Confederates had known about the imminent arrival of the Zerg by 2498 and had been experimenting with captured specimens. Raynor would access the Confederate network and would steal secret information on data disks. Sometimes after the battle, the Sons of Korhal would engage the Confederate fleet of General Edmund Duke in the Battle of Rontes. So, moving on to the Antiguan Revolt. With Manx believing their efforts had weakened, while Manx believed their efforts had weakened the Confederacy's grip on fringe worlds, the Sons of Korhal fled to Cantiga Prime, where headquarters began analysis of the discs. Manx would send Kerrigan and Raynor to free the colony and show their good intent to the Antiguan people. Kerrigan would infiltrate the Antiguan command center and would kill the Confederate officer, stirring up a full-scale revolt against the Alpha Squadron detachment stationed there. The group would begin to operate out of Antigua Prime, striking at outlying Confederate manufacturing facilities, including the Terra family's hovercraft manufacturing plant. The group's adjutant intercepted a priority 1 distress call from General Edmund Duke to Confederate headquarters, learning that the NORAD 2 had crash landed on Antigua Prime and was under attack by the Zerg. Manx would send Raynor to save Duke during this. Alpha Squadron was willing to temporarily ally with their former enemies to rescue their commander. While successful, Duke did not show any gratitude towards Manx. But Manx would convince Duke to join forces with him by playing into his love of power and control and offering him a position in his cabinet. And while all this was going on, you gotta remember they were still decrypting and decoding the data disks that they had taken. And so, what they found on those data disks were designs for a psi emitter, and Mengs would call a meeting where he would order Kerrigan to plant an emitter in the base camp of a large Confederate strike force which had arrived on Antigua Prime 2 hours earlier. The device would end up attracting Zerg to the planet and the camp, which had broken the Confederate blockade, and, and allowing the Sons of Korhal to make their escape, while the Confederates would be fighting off the Zerg themselves. Uh, During or shortly after the fighting on Antigua Prime, the Sons of Korhal were involved in the Battle of Atticus Minor. The Sons of Korhal wrested the planet away from Confederate control, but had to deal with a Zerg infestation afterwards. The War Pigs, a Confederate unit, made an assassination attempt on Arcturus Meigs during the battle, but would end up failing and would end up being forced to withdraw. While all this was going on, there would be secret missions that the Sons of Korhal would take. So, in the time between Antigua Prime and the assault on Tarsonis, the Sons of Korhal made at least 2 additional strikes against the Confederacy. In the first of these, Kerrigan and Rayner were sent to the single moon orbiting G2275, a gas giant. The moon was one of the Confederacy's greatest technological hubs, which would house designs for upgraded Goliaths. Kerrigan had been there a year before and so was familiar with it. She would find a way past their security codes as well. The Sons of Korhal rig was successful. Not only did the Confederacy lose the Goliath designs, the rebels could upgrade their own Goliaths. Later, Rayner and Kerrigan were sent to raid a science facility on Orna 3, where the test subjects were experimented on without consent and were treated horrifically. The Cormorant, captained by Sharon Moore and Matt Horner, would end up transporting them. Kerrigan would bring aboard explosives, which she hadn't told Meigs about, nor did she tell Rayner until well into the trip. She intended to destroy the research rather than hand it over to Meigs. Kerrigan, who knew her way around the facility, pretended to be a ghost who had arrested the criminal Rayner. And it's funny how often this deception would work good if pretending Rayner would be arrested. Throughout all this mission, several scientists and all the test subjects would be rescued, and the corrupt scientists would be killed and the facility destroyed. So, as you see, we start having cracks in the alliance between Minx and Kerrigan, and a bit between Rayner as well. So, these cracks, as you know, would increase until the alliance between probably the 3 most influential Terrans ever in the StarCraft universe would end up breaking. So, moving on. One of the biggest attacks and final missions of the Sons of Korhal before they would be disbanded would be the fall of Tarsonis and its attack. So, I'll do a detailed breakdown in later episodes. I'd like to do dedicated battles, dedicated episodes on each of these battles that happen within the StarCraft universe and the different conflicts as well in later episodes. So I'm just going to kind of do a bit of a basic breakdown on the involvements of the Sons of Korhal in here. So, General Duke would assault the central orbital platform over Tarsonis and would plant Siamens there with Meng's authorization to draw the Zerg. When Executor Tassadar deployed ground forces to engage the Zerg, Meng's would send Kerrigan with a strike force to stop Tassadar's interference. Kerrigan would neutralize the Protoss at New Gettysburg, where a wave of Zerg advanced on her position. She would call immediate evac, but Meng's would order the fleet to move away from Tarsonis, abandoning her to the Zerg, one of probably his greatest mistakes. Jim Rayner would take hundreds of people no longer loyal to Meng's and would remain nearby. He would want to rescue Kerrigan, but found it was impossible. Rayner would desert Meng's, joined by Horner and the former magistrate. And Duke would activate the ion cannon, but Rayner and his troops would have destroyed it so as to escape Tarsonis. So, like I said, the fall of Tarsonis is something that deserves its own separate episode on, but it's pretty big in how the Sons of Korhal would eventually be transformed into the Terran Dominion. But it would also create some of the biggest enemies to the Terran Dominion at the time, to include Raiders and Kerrigan, who would end up becoming the Queen of Blades. But this whole battle was the final kind of nail in the coffin somewhat for the Sons of Korhal at the end. Because the fall of Tarsonis would lead into the collapse of the Confederacy. Because most of the Confederacy's power base, both military, economically, scientifically, all that fun stuff, was based on Tarsonis, to include most of the old families were based on Tarsonis as well. And, even though it's a fictional battle, it kind of shows that you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket or put all your power bases in one central location, such as a planet, one single planet. So, but moving on to political transformation, with the collapse of the Confederacy, the Sons of Korhal would become the primary force opposing both the Protoss and the Zerg. Most Terran survivors quickly pledged allegiance to them, and the group would gain further support by continuing to save their fellow Terrans. They respected local authority and intervened on worlds where they were invited to do so. Promising victory over the aliens, Mengsk would form the Terran Dominion and would crown himself the Emperor. In Arcturus' new dominion, many former Sons of Korhal members were given preference for positions of powers over more qualified individuals. By the Second Great War, an elite marine unit called the Sons of Korhal would be formed as part of the Royal Guard. So, the Sons of Korhal would be formed in 2491 and would technically be reorganized or disbanded in the year 2500, transforming into the Terran Dominion. Their strength at the beginning was about 60, but as you know, they had enough of a big enough army to go against everyone. It's If you take a look at the wiki or just kind of look through everything to gather information, it would look like their strength maybe was around 2,491, maybe a bit more. And they utilized a lot of the same um, military assets as the Terran Confederacy. So a lot of the same type of Marines, Marauders, Goliaths, the different vulture bikes, siege tanks, and the different naval assets at the time. So, but moving on, some known units of the Sons of Korhal would include Alpha Squadron, an elite guard. You'd have Rayner's Rangers, who were formed off of the uh, Marsara Colonial Militia. You'd also have Race Squadron Bravo. So, as known units. But known members would include General Arcturus Mengsk, the leader of the Sons of Korhal, Lieutenant Sarah Kerrigan, who was its second in command but abandoned on Tarsonis and would be infested by the Zerg. You'd have General Edmund Duke, a former Confederate general. You'd have the commander, who is the player character in StarCraft 1, who was considered a former magistrate of Marsara and would abandon the rebel group. Captain Jim Rayner, former marshal of Marsara, who would abandon the rebel group. Lieutenant Pollock Grimes, lapsed in a double agent for Confederacy. And William Warchowski. Some soldiers that we know of would include Sergeant Forrest Kill, who's deceased, Sergeant Lisa Mannix, formerly a part of it, Corporal Song, who's a Goliath pilot, Privates Sumo Hung, Saunders, and Tibbs, who are deceased, and Chuck Ayers, who's formerly a part of it. Naval personnel we know of would include Captain Sharon Moore, Lieutenant Selah Brock, a Wraith pilot, Lieutenant Matt Hormer, formerly, who would go to join on in with Rayner and form the Rayner's Raiders. You'd have Harley, a Wraith pilot. Funny enough, someone who we'll talk about later on, and for a different group, Carolina Davis was also part of the Sons of Korhal. You'd also have a lot of Imogen Protectorate people who would be affiliated with it. Helic Branamore, who was a scientist. Eileen Pastor, who's a Protectorate ambassador. You'd also have Michael Liberty, who was temporarily an affiliate. You'd also have Horace Warfield, who was affiliated with, though not technically, a member with the Sons of Korhal. Some of their slogans would include freedom is not free, fight for our future. So a lot of what we know from the Sons of Korhal comes from the StarCraft 1, comes from StarCraft Uprising, StarCraft I Manx is, I believe, the correct name of the book. Uh, oh, good lord, what are some of the other sources? I'm trying to remember. Some of the StarCraft comics. You'd have StarCraft 2 Flashpoint, have yep, I Manx, StarCraft issue 1, StarCraft Uprising, StarCraft The Queens of Blades, StarCraft Ghost Nova. StarCraft The Speed of Darkness. So the Dark Templar Saga is a big one as well. Those three books. So we actually have a lot on the Sons of Korhal throughout all those different extra sources. So, couple of notes. A Sons of the Korhal t-shirt was released by Blizzard in 2000. The group's decal is available in multiplayer as a reward for reaching level 28 as Terran in StarCraft 2. The Sons of Korhal symbol is also available as an unlockable portrait in Heroes of the Storm. The symbol also appears on the Dominion Ghost speeder mount and classic Jim Raynor skin. So that's a brief overview of the Sons of Korhal, the rebellion group that fought and won against the Terran Confederacy, who, you know, was around for a long, long time. Let's see here. Let me look this up real quick when the Terran Confederacy was disbanded. So it was established in 2323 and would be disbanded in the year 2500. So the Terran Confederacy would go on for almost 200 years. So that's a 200-year legacy disbanded within what, 9 years, give or take. So granted, we've seen that in a lot of other different m- franchises and media and whatnot. But there is some things I kind of want to go over. So if none of you are aware, currently, I I work for the military. I'm currently based out of the UK right now, and I was able to go to the UK Games Expo this past Friday and Saturday, May 29th and 30th. And I was able to stop by the Archon Studios booth and actually get a couple games of the StarCraft tabletop miniature game in. It's pretty interesting. I find it fun, and I think it's going to be a great way for people to get into StarCraft, both as just a way to do something extra with it and as a way to introduce them into the basics of the StarCraft universe. Uh, I can tell you, I like playing Terran on the game, and the Terran are pretty fun on the tabletop. Um, I learned that the Terran like to stay back and shoot. They don't want to get up close and personal. So you have to try and maneuver all your miniatures to get a good line of sight on others and just to kind of have enough of your people able to, reach out and touch them. Uh, so the Protoss, they're lucky. They have an extra type of armor thing called shields on basically all of their miniatures that they currently have that you have to get to first before you start damaging them. Their zealots are really good at close range, along with Artanis. The sentries, ooh, just like in StarCraft 2, they had that force field bubble type thing to block path of walking through. Um, their adepts are able to do that shroud shade dash type ability. So they really did work well with uh, Blizzard to try and get the feel of the abilities of the different units and models within the game to translate over onto tabletop. So if you haven't already, I would think of probably checking it out if you can. I'm pretty sure a lot of local game stores are going to have their own like opening day for the StarCraft game. And if you're a StarCraft fan or if you're just a tabletop gaming fan, I would check it out. I know they've recently released the rulebook online. I'm gonna kind of dig into that, see what I can find, see if there's anything lore-wise to look over. I know that there's gonna be a physical one that comes out with the Founders Edition, which I've purchased. I'm just waiting for all my stuff to come in. And as I stated, we're supposed to get a uh, kind of like a narrative campaign supplement or a narrative type thing between August and October of this year. So we're gonna have a new story set in the StarCraft universe. So, because I plan to get majorly involved in this tabletop game. I plan to keep following it, see what stories come out. I'm excited to see the different factions that they come out with. Because the starter sets, while you have the main races, they also come. So you have the start of the. So you currently have two factions per each race. Terran has the Terran Dominion, which is the base faction for the entire race, which might have a bit more later on down the line, or a more defined part of it, with no, because it currently has no true leader. You have Raiders faction, which you can take Jim Raynor, in to lead with their certain special unit, the Raiders Marines. The Zerg have both the Zerg Swarm as a faction and Kerrigan's Brood as a sub faction, where you can take Kerrigan and a Nidus Swarm. Um, and the Protoss had the regular Protoss faction in the Dalim under Artanis. So, and if you guys haven't followed Archon Studios when they have their Ask Me Anything seminars, web lives, whatnot, uh, they're going to be introducing more of the sub factions along with more units that come out to include stuff from StarCraft 1, Brood War, probably from the different comic books that have come out, the mangas as well. So I'm really excited. And they're also going to be releasing a fourth race, the hybrids, as a faction standalone. So they might be releasing original models in this entire thing as well. So, like I said, I'll probably have a full breakdown. See if I can't get a full breakdown of the rules in the game and how it's played. I was able to take some pictures and a couple of short videos of when I was playing the game. So, you know, I'll put that up on the Discord as soon as I'm able to and just check it out, see what you guys think. I would definitely try and look up on YouTube and see about the game being played fully. I know Play on Tabletop has a video up of where they've played the StarCraft game. So please check it out, see how it is, see if you like it. And I'm hoping we see a lot of lore from it. But I think that's all from me for today. Thank you for checking it out. Hopefully, you guys learned some more about the Sons of Korhal, and hopefully, maybe I'll get another video out this week on another faction or that StarCraft tabletop rulebooks, but you never know. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, this is General Fire signing off, and Intaro Tessador, my friends.